Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
That totally eliminated my panic attacks. And the reason is that it's a very specific type of stress discharge work that's working with the innate wisdom that your body already has within it to discharge stress. And it's helping you. I like to say I don't teach clients TRE. I help them remember how to shake is essentially what it is. We're shaking and doing self-directed. It's called neurogenic tremors, which sounds a little bit scary sometimes, but essentially it's a way that your body can get rid of stress in a way that's more efficient than a panic attack. And so when we can start to tap into that and use that intentionally, then we can make this difference in our life. So this sort of opened up this whole path of me, like I said, learning more about my nervous system in general and finding these other things that also worked with it and just really supporting my system the way that it's designed instead of fighting against it. Because again, this sort of like fighting theme had been a part of my life that frankly, I was done with.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. I promise you it's my goal to be your antidote to stress and to help you calm the storm in your life. So please bear with me for just a moment when I purposely remind you of the stress you've experienced. I promise it's for a good reason, okay? Take a moment to think about something that stresses you out. Sitting in traffic can be one, and if you're doing that right now, you have my deepest sympathies. Some other likely culprits are public speaking, which people fear more than death. Perhaps it's being pulled over for a speeding violation or interacting with authority, or maybe a major work deadline. Whatever it is, I want you to think about how your body reacts in those moments. Heart racing, muscles tense, sweat beating up, blood pressure climbing, heart rate and breathing accelerated. You're focused and on high alert, ready to handle this perceived threat, right? Why do you respond this way? Because no matter the reason, our bodies react the same way due to a surge of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Even remembering these moments might feel stressful to you right now, so let's take a breath before we continue. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Do it with me. In through the count of 3 and out through the count of 5, okay? Inhale, 1, 2, 3, and exhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Okay, the reason I took you through all that is to remind you what stress does to our bodies and the simple ways we can calm the physical response to reset, because that's exactly what my guest today is helping us understand. Today, I welcome Christa Bevan to the Positively Living Podcast. Christa is an expert companion to other radical mothers dedicated to consciously breaking cycles of generational trauma. She's a certified TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises provider, and a stress resilience coach. She is also the host of the Radical Mother Village podcast. Christa works to educate, support, and inspire people who are ready for radical change in their lives using a combination of heart-centered intuitive practices and neuroscience-backed tools. The neuroscience part excites me so. I'm a hybrid of woo and science too, and it makes me so happy when I can connect what we do intuitively to what is happening scientifically. Stress is so prevalent in our lives, and we consider it bad. And that's not completely accurate. So I recommend listening to episode 7 to learn more about what stress is and how we need to manage it. For purposes of our conversation today, we're talking about the physical stress we experience and how it remains in our body far beyond the events, what we call stressors, that put it there. Christa helps us understand what's going on and why that stress residue, or stress clutter as we nicknamed it today, needs to be removed. She refers to the removal as stress discharge and provides 9 ways we can do it simply. You'll find this list very familiar if you listen regularly to the Positively Living podcast, because so many of our conversations here touch upon these techniques. I've listed a bunch of episodes in the show notes relating to these 9 techniques. You can search for the keyword stress in the episode titles to find them. One of the things Christa mentions as a pathway to discharge stress is to talk to a trusted companion. It turns out she and I use the same app to do this, called Voxer. It's a walkie-talkie app that makes it easy to talk out what's going on with another person or a group. It's been so effective, I began using it as extra support for my long-term clients and even created a subscription coaching package around it. You can now receive accountability coaching to reduce stress and be productive through the Voxer app exclusively. No scheduling appointments, just access to your coach on demand. Would you like to try it? Head to positivelyproductive.com/Voxer-coaching and let's start a new discharge pathway today. There are many ways to reduce chronic stress and the problems that it causes, including techniques that are shared in this podcast and mentioned in this episode, like meditation, therapy, and breath work, and removing stressors. Our conversation today will remind you of your options and give you yet another tool for your wellness toolbox. Welcome, Christa Bevan, to the Positively Living podcast. I am so delighted to have you here because we're talking today about something that's incredibly prevalent and incredibly important. So welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. And yes, I agree. This is very important.
So before we get into the topic of the day, would you please share a bit about who you are and who you help and what lights you up?
Yeah. So my name is Christa Bevan, and I am a stress resilience coach for moms who are breaking cycles of generational trauma. And I did not come to that work on accident. I came to that work very much out of necessity. And really, my story along the way, I became a TRE provider, which is tension and trauma releasing exercises. And so that is one thing that I offer and work with anyone on, not just moms. But my core audience is mothers who are doing this work. But I came to this work because I needed it in my own life. I had a history of emotional abuse as a child, and it was really stressful, and it dysregulated my nervous system. And I had panic attacks starting when I was 12 years old. And I needed all the help I could get. And I tried a lot of things, and I tried a lot of different things that were supposed to work, and they didn't. And I was dealing with crippling anxiety and overwhelming panic attacks at their worst that were almost every day. And it really took a lot of trial and error before I found things that worked. And the big one for me was TRE, which was working with my body. We're going to get more into this, I think, about this idea of stress discharge and why it worked so well for me. But it really lit this fire for me about understanding and befriending my body better, because that's something that had been missing in my life. I think it's missing in most people's lives. And for me, I felt betrayed by my body consistently over and over again. And that was a horrible place to be living in. And so once I started to befriend my body and understand more about my nervous system and what I needed to do to take care of it and nourish it, my whole life got better. My anxiety came under control. The panic attack stopped. And that has all served me in my life so well. And now, as a mom, I put that all into practice on a daily basis. So
I'm sure you do. You put it into practice and you also share it. And I love this idea of not only befriending our bodies, but this idea of nourishing the nervous system. If you don't use that phrase already, please do start using that,
I
because
do. Yes.
that is so good. This idea that we can take the experiences that we're having. So you're already made for us this stress trauma connection, and my episode with Mallory Jackson. I have to keep bringing it up. It's on trauma informed life, right? That we all experience trauma and it's different levels, right? But it's okay. We can work through this. And there are different ways that we can encourage healing from it, that we can help ourselves respond and get into a better, safer place. And I'm curious if what you experienced or maybe what didn't work is kind of similar actually to episode 49 with Sarah. She talks about breath work and how that kind of physical work, doing breath work, calmed her down in a way that other techniques couldn't. So what was it that you tried that, is supposed to work that didn't work for you?
So for me, the big one was talk therapy and talking about what was going on in my life, which, just to be very clear, was absolutely invaluable. And at points in my life, saved my life. So I have nothing against talk therapy. The problem is talk therapy only can do so much. And the reason that I ended up finding TRE work is because I had been in therapy for years. I tried lots of other things too, types of talk therapy, medication, lifestyle changes. I had done breath work, I had done yoga, but none of it was enough to really completely, I don't want to say fix because I don't think people are broken, but resolve the problems that I was facing. And the thing that led me to TRE was that I actually got to the point where I said to myself, I'm going to therapy every week, but I don't have anything left to talk about. And I'm still having these issues. I'm still having the panic attacks and the anxiety is still overwhelming me consistently. So what gives? And I realized I had this sort of like aha light bulb moment where I went, I don't have anything to talk about. It's not in my brain. I don't feel I've sort of resolved it. EMDR was really instrumental. I've resolved those issues that were in my mind, but I'm still having the panic attacks, which for anyone who's ever experienced one or even just had anxiety, that it's a very physical event. Panic attacks are a physical expression of anxiety. And so it hit me. If I'm still having all of these physical symptoms, maybe I need something that works with my physical body instead of just my mental body. And that's when like the clouds parted and everything changed and and it all started to make sense. I'm like, well, no wonder my body is still having these things come up and try to get out, because ultimately that's what a panic attack is, because I was leaving it out of the conversation on healing. I was completely setting my body aside in this equation that I was trying to solve. And so then at that point, I sort of had this conversation with the universe where I said, okay, I need some help. This isn't working. And now I know what I need. Give me a sign, right? And sure enough, within weeks, I found my first TRE class and the rest was history, right? That totally eliminated my panic attacks. And the reason is that it's a very specific type of stress discharge work that's working with the innate wisdom that your body already has within it to discharge stress. And it's helping you. I like to say I don't teach clients TRE, I help them remember how to shake is essentially what it is. We're shaking and doing self-directed. It's called neurogenic tremors, which sounds a little bit scary sometimes, but essentially it's a way that your body can get rid of stress in a way that's more efficient than a panic attack. And so when we can start to tap into that and use that intentionally, then we can make this difference in our life. So this sort of opened up this whole path of me, like I said, learning more about my nervous system in general and finding these other things that also worked with it and just really supporting my system the way that it's designed instead of fighting against it. Because again, this sort of like fighting theme had been a part of my life that frankly, I was done with.
Well, sure. When we have so much stress, when we are experiencing, I don't even know, the manifestation of trauma, right? And grief and everything that we're going through, we look at it and we're like, I don't want that. So we do use the word fix. And I love that you made a point to say it's not that we need to be fixed, but we're looking at things and saying, does this serve us? Do we want this? Is it keeping us? It's like when I talk about clutter, then I talk about that physical side of it. Is it keeping you from the life you want to be living? Well, then if it is, right, let's find a way to make some adjustments.
And I love that you bring up clutter because I actually use this metaphor a lot, that stress that's been stuck in your body and that doesn't get discharged. I keep using this word discharge, and we can talk about what that means in this context, but is essentially like clutter in your body. And just like it's no fun to live in a cluttered space, it's no fun to live in a body that's cluttered with stress that you haven't dealt with because, like we've been talking about, this idea of resisting and not wanting to feel it or fearing how, our feelings might overtake us prevents us from engaging with them. And really, if we just allow ourselves to feel the feeling, get through it, then it's done and then it's over with, right? But instead we hold back and then it clutters up our system and it just becomes this energetic clutter that you don't want that. Bring that stuff to Goodwill and drop it off.
I could take a metaphor and I can go for days. So I'm really loving this. And I'm going to give a shout out to Tim by Siegel. In a recent episode we did, he was talking about this idea of the trauma and stress and how we need to embrace support for our mental health. And when you do that, there's a key thing in there. And he used the word submit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're being vulnerable to, you're submitting, you're accepting. There's all these words kind of in there to say, let's just roll with this, let it roll through instead of trapping it. So to go back to this clutter idea, I want to step back for just a second to kind of say that all of the things that you mentioned in terms of talk therapy and breath work and yoga, I'm sure meditation was in there. All of these are legitimate, effective tools. But what you came to discover in using them was that they weren't applying to the problem that still remained, if you will, right? And so you found TRE as another tool in the toolbox. And that's a huge part of why I wanted to have this conversation today, because it does take trial and error. It does take some time where, like when I'm working with a client, going back to the clutter idea, sometimes we talk about your to-do list and your calendar and how are things and what's your mindset in terms of getting things done. And that may actually be really strong. So what really does need to happen is you need to stop and work on that bedroom or that closet or, like that physical clutter. And so in a kind of a similar fashion here, there seems to be areas where we have backups, right, of stress that need to be dealt with. So in going further with this, right, and taking us through this process, I want to make sure we understand this concept of stress or stress that comes from the trauma. What exactly is it and what's happening to our bodies when we experience it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first, we need to make the distinction between stressors and stress. So, we use the word stress to mean both sort of casually when we're talking, but really they're two very different things. And it's important to distinguish them. So, stressors are the usually they're external events that happen to us that we think of as being stressful. So, when you're stuck in traffic, that's a stressor. When your mother-in-law is coming to visit, that's a stressor. When your toddler is having a tantrum and you're trying to cook dinner, that's a stressor. And then stress is the physiological reaction that we have in our body to that stressor. We can have internal stressors, things, if we've got hormonal imbalances or, we're sick, that can be a stressor on our system. But typically those are external events that we may or may not have control over. And the reason that it's important to distinguish this is because a lot of times what happens is that people will remove the stressor from their life, but they don't actually remove the stress. So if you want to go with metaphors, imagine that you've gone on a beautiful tropical vacation and you're sitting on a beach with a cold drink in your hand and you're wondering, why am I still feeling anxious? I'm on a tropical beach with a cold drink in my hand. I've left work behind. I've left, all the things that were causing me what we would call stress in your life behind, and I still feel this way. And the answer is you packed stress in your luggage and you put it on the plane and you took it with you. You didn't actually do anything to remove that part from your body. And so what I see in the sort of landscape of people talking about mental health is that we often discuss dealing with stressors. Whether or not people actually do that effectively is another thing, but we talk about that. We don't talk as much about actually moving the stress out of your body. So again, that physiological reaction. So that's the spike of cortisol, the rush of adrenaline that you're getting that's hitting your body when you get triggered to a reaction to a stressor. And those chemicals that are coursing through your body are incredibly effective. We want those chemicals in our body because if there really is a bear chasing us, we want to be able to run and get out of there. And that takes a spike of energy. The problem is most of us aren't facing actual bears. What we're facing is an email inbox that's overflowing. We're facing a deadline that we can't meet. We're facing things that aren't actually life-threatening threats, but our bodies don't know that. And it responds with that same chemical surge. And then we don't actually do anything to release that and sort of let that out of our system. So if the bear were chasing you and you needed to run to get away, that would use up that adrenaline and cortisol that's running through your body. But since we're not actually doing that, we're not fighting our boss, we're not fighting our children, we're not fighting traffic, we're not running away from these things, hopefully. Those things are still coursing through our body. And over time, they can start to cause damage. We know that chronically stressed systems are correlated with all kinds of health issues. They're correlated with suppressed immune systems. They're correlated with all kinds of the leading causes of death. So we don't want these, right? The overarching theme here is that that's a bad thing. We don't want that to happen. And so what we can do instead is practice nourishing our nervous system, doing the things that we need to do to actually discharge and use up those stress hormones and get them out of our system.
I love it. Okay. So I'm immediately thinking about so many times in my life where I would describe myself as, I would jump in like, you want me in a foxhole with you, right? You want me in a crisis. I am like right there. And then when everyone else is calm and the crisis is averted and everything's good, I'm like freaking out. And it totally makes sense that you describe that. It's like having these residual echoes of the experience, although this is actually, it's not just an echo, but it's an actual physical element that's in our body. Like you said, stress clutter. I love that. I'm using that from now on. It's official. You heard it here. And still having that lingering, if we don't release that, it's going to keep us experiencing the stress as though it were still there.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I was saying earlier, stressors can be internal.
Sure.
So, what can happen, and this gets to be a bit of a mess, but if you stay in a dysregulated nervous system state where you are experiencing this sort of stress in your body long after the stressor is over or has resolved or has left, then that can actually end up being a stressor in and of itself, which then keeps you in a state of stress, which then keeps the cortisol pumping, which then leads to things like burnout and adrenal fatigue, right? And then again, all these other health complications. So it's not just one event, it's the accumulation of events in our life. And even though 2020 sort of forced us all to slow down a little bit and realize how full our lives had been, a lot of us have picked that right back up. And what we do is we go from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing without taking time in between, without having space to rest and recover and reset. And without that, it's like running an engine and letting the RPMs just rev high and high and high. Eventually, you're going to burn out your motor, right? You don't want to do that. And that's what we end up doing. We never shift into a different gear and let the motor cool. We never stop and let ourselves come back to sort of neutral. And this ends up becoming a problem. And we don't want that, right? So there's things that we can do. That's the bad news. The good news is there's actually relatively simple things that we can do. They're simple. They're not always easy because, again, our culture praises this idea and mentality of productivity and go, 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 go. But actually, the research shows us that people who have better regulated nervous systems are also more productive because they're able to actually focus and get things done and be more efficient, right? So there's this sort of like this wrong idea in our heads that if we just keep going, 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 then we'll get the thing done. And actually that makes us less productive. So it's beneficial to rest and do these things. So if you want, I can get into what those stress discharge ideas are.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to give a shout out to all of the concepts that you just mentioned. Thank you very much for pretty much supporting what it is that I do as a productivity coach, helping people understand productivity is not about doing more. It's about doing less efficiently and achieving what you want to achieve and creating that space that you talked about to rest, to reflect, to shift gears, to downshift, to upshift, to go with the ebb and flow and be able to like surf the waves of life in a way that you can, going back to that word, to submit a bit more and to not always be fighting and pushing, because when we're in, again, that goes back to trauma responses, right? The fight or flight, and always be pushing. It goes to the hustle culture that I'm like up here on my soapbox. I'm so glad you joined me today on my soapbox about that, because we need to get this conversation highlighted that you're actually going to be better off if you reduce the stress and if you are in a better place. So, yes, please guide us through what we're looking for and what we need to do in order to do that, Christa.
So there's lots of different, what I call stress discharge pathways that our body has innately. So one of them, and I like what you said too earlier, I just want to mention that here about this idea of finding the thing that works for you. Because I have a list of things here, and some of those you're going to go, yeah, I like that one. And then other ones you're going to listen to and go, that's not me. And that's okay. You don't need to do all of these. You just need to know what the menu is and then order what you want, right? And I say that because this first one is the one that I don't like. But I
Awesome.
hear that people like running, and I still think that's a little odd, but they tell me that they do. So it's a physical movement, right? When we talk about stress responses, that one's right in the name, fight or flight. And this idea of movement, because again, what we want to do here is use up those excess stress hormones that are circulating in our body. And movement of any type is a great way to do that. So running or exercise or yoga or Pilates, whatever it is, whether you want to play tennis or you want to go for a run or go for a hike, intentional movement that's really working on those things is going to help move that stress out of your body. So that's one option. Another option is positive social interaction. I call this the phone a friend option, right? So if you are having a rough time, when my kid is giving me one of those days, I'll call somebody, I'll call a friend, I'll pick up Voxer, I'll chat with my bestie, I'll FaceTime my aunt, I'll call my mom, right? That connection is a great way to basically borrow that other person's nervous system state and let yours then down regulate to meet it. And in that social connection, you can co-regulate yourself to them, and then you can help yourself feel better and discharge that stress. So that's a great one that I really love. Other ones, and we've actually talked about this, but are breath work. And breath work is an excellent way. Anytime you take a breath with a longer exhale than the inhale, you're automatically giving the signal to your body to switch into a parasympathetic nervous system state, which calms the body. And so breath work is one that's really excellent. Laughter. And it has to be really good, like gut laughter. Like it can't be fake. It can't be fake laughter. It has to really be authentic. So one of the things I suggest to people is, and this sounds a little silly, but make yourself a YouTube playlist of videos that are, I don't care if it's funny animal videos or babies or what it is, bloopers, right? Like different people will laugh at different things, but find a couple of videos, make yourself a 10-minute playlist of things that always make you laugh, like can't help but giggle. And then just keep that and just have that at, if you're at work and you need to reset, go into the bathroom and watch a video for 60 seconds and start do something to sort of move that through your body, right? Other things are affection. And this has been well documented, but like, I think it's from the Gottman Institute, the 6-second kiss that gets oxytocin flowing in your body. Same with a hug. So I can't remember how long the hug needs to be. If it's 6 seconds, it might be 20 seconds for the hug, but a hug for longer than most people would normally engage in a hug will also help release oxytocin, which is like the love hormone, the feel-good hormone, will help sort of counteract and get those chemicals in your body switched around to something that's more helpful. And you can also do that with pets, right? So, and we all know this if we have animals, a purring cat is really great. Playing with a dog, time spent in nature is really good. And especially if you can, if it's an option. I live in Vermont, so this option is not always available to me, but having bare feet on the ground actually helps to change your nervous system state and down regulate you into a place of relaxation. And then there's a couple others that I love. Creativity, creative expression, whether that means painting or singing, quilting, knitting, it doesn't matter. If it's some sort of creative expression, that has actually also been shown to downregulate your nervous system. And then there's other things like shaking. And I bring this up because this is what we do in TRE And this is something that a lot of people fight against. So for those of us, and this is probably, Lisa, not you or I, because we podcast and so we like talking, but most people have a fear of public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can imagine that and you think about that situation, or you have to do a presentation at work, or even if you like hear sirens and you get pulled over, you shake, right? That sort of feeling of shaking. And people often think that that means that you are scared or that you're weak. We attribute it to weakness, that you're afraid, but in a very disempowered sort of way of being afraid. And really what's happening is that shaking is your body using up those excess hormones. It's discharging them from your body, and it's doing it on purpose to try to regulate your system. Your body always wants to come into a place of balance, essentially, right? And so it's trying to do that. It knows if you really need to do this presentation and you can't get out of it, your fighting and flighting options aren't available. Your freezing option isn't available. So you're doing the thing anyway, but you still have too much cortisol running through your body, and the shaking uses some of that up. So if we know that, then we can stop feeling so bad about it, and we can do things ahead of time to discharge some stress before we have this anticipated stressor. And this is where I talk about making a plan for anticipated stress, knowing what your stress hotspots are. For my husband, he hates public speaking. So when he has to teach a class at work, I tell him to do these things ahead of time to help himself to then be able to go into that with a little leg up on having to do this thing he doesn't like to do, right? Anyway, I got a little off track. The last one that I want to talk about is crying. And we all know this, right? You feel better after a good big cry, big, hot, ugly tears cry. It actually releases stress. What's really fascinating is they've measured this. I don't know if they've done it in adults. I should really look that up, but I know they've done it in babies. They've measured the hormones in their tears, and the hormones in their tears are different based on what they're crying about. So a cry for hunger is different than a cry because they're stressed. And a stressed cry will actually excrete some of these hormones that we're talking about, which I think is just absolutely brilliant and fascinating, and like just speaks to the beautiful wisdom of the body to know how to take care of itself.
Right? Because that's a new one on me. Now, I knew about the studies showing the distinction in tears. So if you laugh until you cry, that those are going to be different chemical compounds in those tears will be different than crying from sadness. But I didn't know the distinction of the level of the cry for hunger versus like the cry of stress, fear, worry, whatever's happening, and how that is so different, and that it takes care of the clean out that we're talking about here that is so necessary to release those hormones. This is a fantastic list. And boy, oh boy, does this touch upon so many conversations we've had on the Positively Living podcast already, minus the running. I usually joke, I only run when I'm chased.
I joke. I'll do you one better, Lisa. I joke. I wouldn't run if you chased me.
Well, oh my gosh. Yeah, no, you take it to a next level, Christa. I bow to you. Okay. But that being said, when you said intentional movement, intentional being one of my favorite words, it's the idea of, okay, we're moving our body to release. So maybe it's not running. For me, I will, Zumba anytime, right? So that totally works. The social interaction. I Voxer my biz bestie. Shout out to Liz. And you're right. It's beyond the ranting. We know sort of, I think, intuitively that ranting to friends can help, but now you're helping us understand why, that we're actually borrowing their state at the time, right? Now, that does bring up a point that we have to be careful who we're ranting to about what sometimes, right? So that we don't keep heightened. That's an interesting caveat there. But when we have the right people supporting us, which I talk about so much, right? The right support group where they're like, okay, I'm here to listen to you rant and let you work through it so that you can move on. And when you do that, and I'm especially known for that because I can be calm when someone's freaking out. That's what I do as a coach, right? And it's like, then they can just get it out, yell and rant and scream, cry, all of those things all comes back to this idea of releasing and getting it out. Great point about longer exhale on the breath work. Laughter. What? I don't understand. That's not something I do here. I love it. but that it's got to be real. I tried this laughter yoga one time and I actually had a problem with it because I was like, oh, so you're trying to get me to do breath work that's actually really good for me. But we're not talking about anything like truly funny. So we're actually just fake laughing and I'm not okay with fake. So I actually didn't enjoy it, but you might. But it shows us how it's all connected. And it also shows me that I need to watch the cat videos where they're scared by cucumbers or they make the sound. Rawr! I don't know why, but that always makes me laugh. So find what always works for you, right?
For me, it's the British like narration of the animal videos, like the Alan, or there's this one that I can think of in my head. It's on my playlist, but where they do like the British narration, like the monkeys and like the dent. They're like, open up, let's look at your teeth, and those just kill me. They absolutely get me every time.
Oh,
So
what about the one
yeah.
with the horses? There's two horses, and I think it is. I can't remember if he's an Australian narrator, and the horses are see a bunny and they're afraid, and the woman's like, "Come get your food," and they're like, "No, he might kill us," like
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Those. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. So those are a couple of tips if you need some stress release. So all of these things, there's so many different options, but the one that you work on specifically that you help people with that may be, I guess, it's intuitive that we do it, but using it intentionally might not be as intuitive is the shaking, is the TRE.
Yes.
So, given that, you talked about how we can plan for stress responses, like for the example of your husband not liking the public speaking. I think a lot of people feel that way. We're excluded, we're the odd ones out here, but that's okay. When you talked about getting pulled over, yeah, that immediately shot my heart rate up. So I could
Mm-hmm.
totally feel that. So, how do we go about planning for these stress responses and what we can do? What do we do today? How do we walk away from this saying, okay, now that I know this, here's what I can do?
Yeah. So to me, it's really a two-pronged approach. One is anticipating things that you know to be stressful. So, for instance, I'll give you an example from my own life. I have a 2-year-old, and taking him to the grocery store, it's gotten a little bit better actually since I started doing this. But about 6 months ago, it was a nightmare getting him into the car and out of the car and into the grocery car and keeping him from pulling everything into like the whole thing was just. And then in the pandemic and with the mask on and winter, it was too much. And I started to recognize that every time we were getting low on groceries, like I would be down to the last 2 eggs and out of creamer, I would start to panic because I knew it meant I had to go to the grocery store. And it was causing me all of the stress. So I said, wait a minute. I recognized that, right? And then I made a plan for it. I said, what can I do differently? I obviously still need to get groceries on a regular basis. So is there something I can change? And I went, yeah, I can do the order pickup. I can spend the $5, and all I have to do is, while we're out for an errand anyway, I can just drive through the line and then I don't have to deal with the in and out and all of that. And so I changed how I approached it, right? So we can plan for things and then change them where we can. Now, of course, there's things that we can anticipate as stressful events that we can't stop or can't work around. So when those happen, or when we get blindsided by stress and things, because that's what happens, I'm often saying stress is inevitable, but how we deal with it doesn't have to be. So when that stress that you plan for that you can't get around, or the blindside stress happens, that's when you go to that list that I just gave you. That's when you have your own, and this is something that I help clients create, but a customized personal reset list. So you know that these things help you. This is your dance party playlist of music that you can't help but get up and have a dance party to, which is one of my favorite stress tips because it's actually combining a lot of those: movement, breath work, social interaction when I dance with my kid, all these different pieces of that. But have things that you start to have in your toolbox that you can rely on. Know who those people are that you can call that are going to help when you're having trouble with a business problem versus trouble that you're having with your spouse versus trouble that you're having with your kids, right? And know who those people are. And then the other thing, so I guess this is really a three-pronged approach, but the final thing is starting to just notice and be intentional about adding this stuff in anyway, because life is stressful. We're all dealing with it. The world that we live in is not what our ancestors evolved to live in. So regardless of If you're a monk sitting in a cave in the Himalayas, you probably still need your own personal reset list because life is still just stressful. And so we need to start building some of these activities into our day. Again, like you were saying, I love this word as well, with some intention that's going to help keep us in a place where we are regulated and happy and balanced. And then we have more capacity to deal with the stuff that comes up. It helps us on both fronts. It helps us deal with things that we've experienced and also helps us deal with things that are on their way.
Which inevitably they will be, as you said.
Exactly.
And more importantly, or I should say as a bonus, really, it's almost like a bonus edition. All of these things that you mentioned are not only taking care of what we need to take care of with regard to the stress discharge, but they have so many other benefits as well. So this is efficiency 101 right here is like, oh, I'm doing this, it's taking care of the stress discharge. And by doing Zumba, I am I'm getting stronger and I'm able to, handle people that stress me out.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, but that's really how it works, right? You start to expand your window of tolerance of being in states that are less than ideal without losing your cool.
Right. And you fix areas again. I go back to the word fix because it's troubleshooting, problem solving, whatever you want to call it, in that it's making the adjustments you need to make because maybe something that was stressing you out was not being as fit as you'd like to be to interact with your children or to move around your house or whatever, or keep up with your job or your business. And then by incorporating the intentional movement, you become more fit. So it's sort of solving problems, allowing you the stress reduction, the discharge that you need. And then, I mean, so much more. So I think this is a great, like you said, simple way. And what's super simple about it is that all of these things are not like one specific way you must do this. It's do it your way. And I love that. That's what I'm all about. Find your way, your favorite playlist, your favorite kind of intentional movement, your favorite people, and go for it. And you're good to go. I think that's a wonderful place for us to wrap up. What do you think?
That sounds great. Yes.
Okay. So tell us where we can find you to talk more about TRE and all these good things that you help us with.
So you can find more on my website, which is christabevan.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I also have a podcast, and those are all under the same name, which is The Radical Mother Village.
Love that. And I'll be sure to have those links in the show notes so that you can find Christa. So now, speaking of fun and laughter and a bunch of these other things, we're going to take care of some of it right now. Let's have some fun together with a rapid wrap up. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, please fill in the blank. The song that lifts my spirits and makes me dance is?
So it's that song by Justin Timberlake. And I don't know if this is the actual title, but it's Can't Stop the Feeling. It's from the Trolls movie. And I can't help it. Like I smile, I shake, I like shake my butt. Like I can't help but get up and groove to that one.
There you go. And speaking of having playlists for such things, this will be on the Positively Living Podcast Spotify Dance Playlist, Volume 3. There are 3 volumes now for you to choose from to put on that music that just lifts you up and gets you off your chair and makes you shake what your mama gave you. So,
yes, love it.
Awesome. Now, how about a quote or a mantra that inspires me and I love to share?
So, this is one of my own, but I love it and it inspires me. So, and it is when mothers heal, the world heals.
I love that. And it's so true.
Thank you. And I agree.
Okay. How about a resource like a book or app, something like that, that has made my life better?
So, and this actually fits in with this conversation, and that is the app Voxer. If you are not on Voxer yet, you need to go get Voxer and you need to get a bestie on there because I'll tell you what, she's turned into my best friend. She started as my business bestie, and now at this point, she's just my best friend for life. But we Voxer each other back and forth all day. And she is the person when I just need to my day is not going the way I wanted it to. I get on there and then she talks me down off the ledge and then vice versa. And it is the most mom-friendly, business-friendly, productivity helpful app that I have on my entire phone.
I heartily agree. I have it on mine. I talk with my biz bestie, who's become so much more than a biz bestie as well. So I know what you're talking about there. And it's fabulous because it's like being able to text back and forth, and you can send, links and pictures and all kinds of stuff, but it's walkie talkie style, so that if you're both in the app at the same time, you can hear what's being said and then reply back right away. So it can be an instantaneous thing, but it can also be, most importantly, especially for us moms, this, leave a message kind of thing and then go back and check later. And I actually love this app so much that I have now incorporated it into my coaching packages, and I have a Voxer coaching as an option because sometimes scheduling is so difficult. Well, see, there you go. Okay. Fabulous suggestion. Yes. Everybody get on Voxer. Let's all chat.
Yes.
Okay. And last, but definitely not least, what or whom are you grateful for today, Christa?
Who am I grateful for? I'm grateful for my son. He keeps me on my toes, but man, I love that kid.
Our children, they teach us so much. They challenge us, but in the best way possible.
Yes, they do.
Well, I am most certainly grateful for you. And I want to thank you so much, Christa, for shining your light in this world and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.